5 years of building love, 5 years of dedication, and in just a moment, everything changed. A 28-year-old husband discovered that his wife was having an affair with a colleague, a severe shock that no one could have predicted. After this truth, their lives will never be the same again. But what he couldn't accept were the events that happened afterward. Can a broken relationship be restored? Can one wrong decision ruin a life forever? The answer will make you reconsider the value of trust and love. My wife betrayed me. She, whom I trusted and loved, had an affair with a former supervisor of hers who was married with children. This was truly a shock to me, a shock that I could never have imagined would happen in our lives. We have been married for 5 years, and our relationship started during our high school days. Up until now, we have been each other's first relationship, the first everything in life. Even when we were kids, we were neighbors. We grew up together in broken families, and I always thought we would create something different, a love unlike anything we had ever seen. But maybe I'm just an idiot. While I work remotely, my wife has returned to working directly at the company. She once confided in me a lot about her job, saying that the work environment was like a boys' club, where she was one of the few women. And it was in this environment that she met her former supervisor, the man who would later become her affair partner. Recently, my wife got promoted, and I'm very happy for her. She's now a supervisor, which means she'll have more responsibilities, including long business trips. Her first business trip was last week, from Wednesday to Friday. Before she left, she told me she would leave her heart with me and take care of it. Those were the words she always said to me every time we were apart. On Monday, when she returned home early, I immediately noticed something was wrong. She seemed dazed, and there was a strange red mark on her right cheek. She looked tired, pale, and seemingly vulnerable. I asked her what happened, but she just asked me to hug her. She said she just needed to feel my hug. When I hugged her a moment later, she told me about the incident that happened at work. She told me to sit down on the couch and started confessing. She said she had sex with her former supervisor during a business trip. Her words were like a strong blow to my mind. I couldn't believe my ears. I felt like I was witnessing something happen to someone else, or like she was about to say it was all a cruel joke. I was silent, unable to utter a word. Silence persisted throughout her confession. Cheating is an extremely sensitive subject for me, one that my family has had to deal with since I was a child. My father had an affair, and I was the one who found out and told my mother. That broke my family apart, and my relationship with my father never healed. He never forgave me for destroying the family. My wife betrayed me. This was devastating because she was the person I loved and had put all my trust in. She, whom I had seen cry many times because of the pain from past deception, became the one who brought that pain to me. She saw me cry because my father had an affair, comforted me when we were young, but now she did the same thing to me. That makes me inexplicable and unacceptable. I listened to her talk during the confession. My heart felt like it was broken. We built our whole life like a seemingly solid castle, but just one moment of weakness caused it all to collapse. And now that man's wife has found out. She was confronted by her supervisor and his wife at work. A painful scene surrounded by employees and customers witnessed. That woman called my wife trash and slapped her. After the slap, the staff had to intervene and the woman was dragged out of the building. It was all like a nightmare, and neither my wife nor I could have imagined it would go this far. My wife immediately called her sister, who was 30 years old. Her sister scolded her and asked her to tell me the truth, to let me hear her own account of what happened. I couldn't say anything at that time, I just wanted it to stop. But she asked me to speak up. The only thing I could say at this moment was to ask her to explain everything clearly about the business trip. She said that on the second day, she had drinks with the other group leaders, and the group came home late. She felt she needed to participate to bond with everyone. That night, each team leader dispersed until only she and her old supervisor remained. They went back to his room to listen to music, and he kept praising her, saying she was very sexy, and if it were me, he wouldn't be able to keep his hands off her. Finally, he kissed her, and my wife could not resist. She told me she wasn't thinking clearly at the time, and let him continue. Then things got worse when he groped her, and they proceeded to have sex. I can't bear it anymore. Hearing what she said, I stood up and asked her to stop. She reached out to grab my hand, but I moved away, saying, "Don't touch me. I can't keep listening anymore." She burst into tears, sobbed, apologized, asked for forgiveness, said that it was the biggest mistake of her life and that she hated herself for doing so. She repeated over and over that she loved me, only me, and that alcohol was the reason she couldn't control herself. But I cannot forgive. I told her she needed to leave and asked her to call her sister to pick her up. She stood up, sobbing, and tried to hug me, but I couldn't respond. She begged me not to do it, saying she would quit her home, give me full control of her phone, and we would go to counseling together. But I can't keep everything. I told her that if she didn't want to leave, I would be the one to leave. I didn't stop to gather my things. I simply walked out the door. I felt her hand clutching my arm, repeatedly begging me not to do it, telling me that after everything we'd been through, we couldn't let things end like that. But seeing her in that state, when she was crying, I felt the pain in my heart like a wound that could not heal. I love her so much, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. But she broke me. She threw away everything we had built, and I couldn't live in a relationship that was completely broken. Finally, I went to my mother's house, and I'm still there now. My heart is so broken that I don't know how to move on. I didn't know how I could drive home and stay calm, but when I got there, I couldn't stop crying. My mother has never seen me cry, whether when I was a child or an adult. Only my wife was the only person who witnessed those tears. When I told my mother what happened, I couldn't hide the pain in my heart. She was equally in pain. My mother has always treated my wife like a daughter, and now that relationship has completely changed. The two of them used to get along, but now there is only silence filled with sadness. My mother tried to comfort me, telling me that I could stay as long as I wanted, that she would stay with me until I found peace of mind. Since I left home, my wife hasn't stopped calling and texting me. My phone vibrated almost constantly with pleas, asking where I was, saying she wanted to talk and hoping I would return. Every text message was a plea for me not to leave her, not to throw away everything we had built. But I just felt like I was being torn apart from the inside, unable to answer, unable to write back a single word. I always thought I understood the pain of betrayal, but now I realize it is much greater when I have to go through it myself. I never thought my wife could do this. I trusted her blindly, that she would never cheat on me. But now I'm just wondering if I should give us another chance. Should I go to counseling and try to save the relationship? Recalling the memories of us, of the love I had for her, of the times we seemed perfect together? I don't know what to do. We built a life together, and when I felt like I had no one left, she was always by my side. But now I just feel confused, not knowing how to continue. I'm in a losing situation. I feel like I've lost everything, and I'm so sorry that I don't know how to deal with this. I couldn't stop thinking about how the other man's wife had found out, about everything that had happened since before we thought things were okay. Everything about her job, her promotion, was too perfect for anything to go wrong. Maybe it all started before the business trip. Perhaps she was just trying to explain herself for her actions, but really it was too painful. This couldn't just be a one-night stand, and I felt everything that was happening. Text messages and statements from before the trip clearly indicated that she was indeed in another relationship. The feeling of betrayal is still like a deep wound that cannot heal. Not only did it hurt me, but it also made me lose all faith in what I had believed in for so long. When I decided to find a way to contact my partner's wife, I began to realize the cruel truth that I had never imagined. Without hesitation, she responded immediately and we had a video call. Just through her eyes, I knew immediately that she was going through the same pain as me. She recounted that after being fired from work, she tried to find a way to contact me, but couldn't. She threatened my wife that she would tell me everything, and that prompted my wife to rush home, prepared to confess the truth. Listening to her words, I realized that the incident did not just start with a business trip, but was prepared in advance with messages full of passion and affection. What I feel now, hearing all these details, is confirmation of all the fears I had in my heart. When the other betrayed wife shared what she had witnessed, I could barely keep calm. She said that since January, she has realized that her husband is gradually withdrawing and no longer cares about her like before. One time, she saw him texting my wife, but he brushed it off and explained that it was just work. But the day before the trip, when she went to work and happened to drop something that his lover had forgotten, she saw him and my wife together in the office, standing close to each other, joking around, and smiled. She immediately sensed the flirtation between them, but when they saw her, they both quickly separated, with my wife looking frightened and him trying to tell everything. As this wife recalled, she felt that there was definitely something wrong between my wife and her husband, but she was in no hurry to say it. She wants solid evidence to prove deception. After the trip, her lover became even more distant and cold, and that night she checked his phone. She found messages between him and my wife, intimate messages that seemed to have begun before the business trip, as an obvious emotional deception. She said that in the text messages, it was clear that the cheating partner was the one pursuing my wife. But that didn't surprise her because my wife had never rejected his advances. Some text messages before the trip also showed him talking about multiple miscarriages with his wife, and the way he described her left me feeling disgusted. He also said that maybe he needed a woman like my wife. A text message from last Thursday night when he invited my wife to join the team for drinks, and a text message the next morning clearly showed that they had had sex. By this time, there had been no more messages from my wife after Thursday night, and my feelings of hurt had only deepened. When the other wife shared with me that she tried to stay calm and didn't want to wake her twins, I felt the humiliation and anger she endured. She didn't confront her husband right away, but in her heart, she already knew that he had crossed a line of no return. She can't stand the betrayal and wants to humiliate him the way he did her. She pretended to smile and act like everything was fine until she decided to confront him on Monday at work in front of coworkers and customers. She shared that this confrontation had been planned for a long time, and as a coincidence, my wife also came to the company that day. When the other wife saw my wife with a colleague, she couldn't keep quiet any longer and decided to confront her directly. My wife tried to stay calm, but ultimately the confrontation could not be avoided. The other wife said that her husband showed absolutely no remorse for his actions, instead showing anger at her outburst. After that confrontation, the other wife said that my wife's adulterous partner was fired the next day. She kicked him out of the house and said that one of the most painful things in her life was having to explain the truth to her twins. She understood the pain I was going through because my mother also had to go through the same thing after my father betrayed the family. She went on to say that through this ordeal, she realized who her husband really was. Even though he pursued my wife, she also realized that my wife was partly responsible in this matter. As a woman, you cannot sympathize or respect my wife at all. I replied to her that I did not blame her and that she had every right to feel that way. She later apologized to me for her husband's role in the affair. I couldn't say anything for a moment, just stood still, and then I also apologized for my wife's role in this story. She said that now she and I had become part of a club that neither of us ever wanted to join, a club that our loved ones had been unable to join. Love forced us to join. She asked about my wife, and I honestly said I didn't know what to do, but I was no longer living with her. She wished me the best, and I did the same for her. Before ending the conversation, we exchanged phone numbers so that if needed, we could contact again. All my emotions seemed to be more complicated. When I confided in my mother about what I had just learned, she said nothing, but I could sense my wife's obvious discomfort. Part of me feels an indescribable happiness when I see my fair partner lose everything. His repo, his family, and maybe even his happiness. But at the same time, I felt a wave of guilt coming over me because of that feeling, because I knew that the children would have to live in a broken world and they would have to go through the pain of losing their father that they love. I also feel angry at my wife for what she did to us, for the broken vows, and for what she made me endure. After the business trip, we became close, and post-trip text messages showed that she did not use protection, which only made me more worried about my health and the possible consequences. I knew I needed to confront my wife and ask for a clear timeline of what happened, but in my mind, I felt like I was lost, not knowing what to do next. Like a sinking ship, I feel like I'm slowly losing everything. And yes, I feel things the same way. Even though my wife may be prepared to be honest and save the relationship, I cannot be certain that she won't continue to lie. That feeling made me feel like I was falling into an abyss with no way out. I cut off contact with my wife, who had an affair with her coworker. I want to start this by thanking everyone for the advice, comfort, and support you have given me. Even though there were comments and messages that made me feel uncomfortable, I realized that they all came from a good place. A week has passed since D-Day. After a conversation with my partner's wife, I tried to resolve things, but my sleep was still restless. To know that my wife, my best friend, who I've known since I was 5 and started dating since I was 13, could do this to me, I feel like a shell. Hollow. When I go out, I feel like everyone around me knows me and they're chuckling at me. The feeling when I faced her was indescribable. Feeling depressed, heavy, as if my whole body no longer had any strength left to continue. I decided to cut off contact and asked her to give me a clear timeline and a proper explanation. On Sunday, I'll leave it unannounced to see if she's really sincere. Some people in my situation have mentioned that the equity partner could stay at our house, and I can't accept that. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was confronting the contamination of the very home we had built together for most of our adult lives. That's where we shared so many memories, joys, and sorrows. That painful feeling stuck with me. But after all, what I thought was impossible had now actually happened. To get more clarity about my fair partner's car, I contacted the other wife, and she provided me with the information. As I drove back home, I started looking for the car, but I couldn't find it. When I entered the house, I saw my wife sitting quietly on the sofa, looking surprised when she saw me. Her eyes were red, as if she were crying, and it looked like she was trying to hide her pain. I hate seeing her like that, but I can't harden my heart. Even though I wanted to comfort her, the memories of what happened resurfaced, making it difficult for me to act the way I wanted to. My wife called my name, walking towards me with a flicker of relief, but I asked her to stop. She complied, but still said she was worried about me and thanked me for coming home. I asked her if any equity partners were here. She said no, but I still searched the house. After a while, she followed me and confirmed that there was no one here. I haven't found any evidence to the contrary. I kept asking if she had any contact with him. She admitted that he left a voicemail, but she didn't call back and blocked his number. She showed proof of it, but my heart still couldn't calm down. We sat at the dining table. I tried to restrain myself from letting my emotions take over, but really it was hard to stay calm. I asked her to answer my questions, and she agreed, looking relieved that we could finally face each other and talk again. I asked her if she had quit her job, and she said no, but she had been suspended for a week pending the results of the investigation into the equity partner who was fired that day. She said that was the only reason she hadn't quit her job yet, because she needed time to figure things out. Tomorrow, she will know the results of the investigation. When I asked her to tell me about that relationship, she started recounting it, but I already knew part of the story from before, thanks to the information the betrayed spouse had provided me. She said that the affair began with intense feelings and flirtations at work, but she insisted that they only had one time. I felt an old wound being reopened as she confirmed it. She didn't go into too much detail, but just hearing her admit it was enough to make me feel like everything had suddenly fallen apart. I couldn't speak, just sat there in silence, filled with a feeling of confusion. She looked at me, her eyes filled with pleading, hoping I would share my thoughts. I asked her why she did that, why she betrayed everything we had built, when she knew so well about my family history, about the trauma I had gone through. She cried, saying that she had never been dissatisfied with me or our marriage, that she loved me and that this relationship was the most important to her. But her actions were completely opposite. She admitted that she didn't understand why she did it and that she never intended to hurt me. But all her explanations were like a sharp knife cutting into my heart. She says her actions killed her, and if she could, she wishes she could go back and fix it all. She said that when she had sex with that man, she made a lot of mistakes and realized she was in too deep and didn't know how to get out, especially since her cheating partner has always defended her at work. She said that this relationship was not my fault, but it was all her fault. When I asked her if she felt forced, she replied that everyone loved him and that as far as she knew, he had a boys' club at work. She said that when she had sex, she felt like she was frozen. She couldn't do anything but apologize. and if she could, she would take it all back. At this moment, I feel like all my emotions are slipping away. I asked her why she had sex with me, which she herself initiated. She could only say that she felt so disgusted and guilty that she wanted to wash it all away by being with me again. I couldn't accept that explanation, saying that she had done nothing but endanger me to ease my conscience. She didn't react, just continued to cry. Then I asked her if she was going to tell me the whole truth. She said she wanted to confess but was scared because she knew that cheating would be a big obstacle for me. She thinks she can fix it by ending the affair and not contacting her partner outside of work hours. She said she stopped texting him after they had sex. When I asked him if he used a condom, she revealed that it hadn't been planned, and because she'd been so quiet, she hadn't mentioned it to him. She said she would never forgive herself and that I had every right to hate her, but seeing the pain she had caused me and the loss of being without me, without contact, made her extremely scared. She begged me to give our marriage another chance, but I couldn't help but compare her to my father. I remarked that the difference between her and my father was clear, and she tried to take my hand, but I moved away. She said that we weren't like my parents, that we could get through this, that we had been through so much together. But I can't say anything. My question about the timeline scared her, but I insisted and eventually she agreed. I asked her to get tested, and she agreed without resistance. As I packed my bags to leave, she begged me to stay, saying she would sleep on the couch as long as I was home. I refused, insisting that I couldn't stay here with her. When I left, she said she loved me very much and was sorry about everything. But I just remained silent, unable to utter a word. Then she asked where I was, and I confessed that I was with my mother. She asked if I could tell my mother something, but I replied that I couldn't be her intermediary. I knew she was worried about her relationship with my mother. As I said before, my mother has always treated her as a daughter, but this stubborn wife has never really had a mother in her life. She had suffered from neglect for a long time. She asked if she could hug me, but I refused and walked away. I'm just weighing my options. She continued to add more facts, but nonetheless, facts are facts. I didn't know what to make of her confession about feeling stiff during sex. I also don't know if I'm ready to tell this affair to others because I feel extremely embarrassed. Regardless, I'm trying to live day by day and would greatly appreciate any advice on how to proceed from here. It feels like she's completely frozen in this relationship. She agreed to that, and I have to admit, they probably had sex more than once. But how can there be protection in situations like these? It's really painful. This feeling almost too intimate with the person you just had sex with. Was I wrong to feel this way? Update 3. I received a timeline from my wife about the affair with her coworker. Thank you everyone for your continued support. Here is the latest information on the situation. I kept in light contact with my wife, and she texted that she would attend the meeting after the suspension. An hour later, she announced that she had been fired. We talked about STD tests and decided to go on Thursday. Last night, she FaceTimed me. I answered hesitantly, and when I saw her, she looked the same as she did on Sunday. She said she had finished her schedule, and I announced that I would come see her tomorrow. She says writing this timeline has been one of the hardest things in her life, second only to our current breakup. She is trying not to cry. Normally, I would comfort her, but this time I couldn't. My mother offered to come along for support, and she said she would wait in the car instead of going into the house. I sensed she was worried about my driving home, and I accepted my mother's offer. When my mother and I arrived, my wife was sitting inside holding a 2-page document. She was nervous, and I sat next to her on the couch, feeling like I was once again facing D-Day. I asked her to read the timeline she had prepared. She was trembling, anxiety and fear evident on her face. We used to get along very well, but now her fear causes me even more pain. I said I needed her to do this for me, and after a moment of silence, she started reading. It felt as if time had stopped, and everything around me suddenly turned into a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Like D-Day, the day I could never have imagined. When she admitted her affair, my heart was ripped apart. What I heard was no different from what I had suspected all along, but when she confirmed it, my pain became even sharper. Her timeline of her relationship with her cheating partner, how they met, and how that relationship developed made me feel like everything was falling apart right before my eyes. The conversation that followed made me even more unbearable. She said that while he was joking around with the tease, he didn't really go along with any nonsense, but always tried to help her feel seen and understood. A friendship gradually formed, but then things went too far. The cheating partner begins to confide about his family life, and she is the one to listen to him. He often asked about her. It seemed like he was trying to exploit her emotions. She said that she shared with him about her mother's relapse, and he became more and more bold, evoking her deep emotions. She wished she had spoken up sooner, but was blinded by what she perceived as the cheating partner being one of the good guys. At work, her colleagues ridiculed her for being her partner's favorite, and she did not confide in me about this because I was facing family problems at the time. She felt that all her problems at that time were too small compared to what I was going through, so she didn't want to add to my stress. She gradually takes out her anger on her cheating partner, and the affair begins to become increasingly emotional. All of this happened while we kept open communication with each other, and I always thought that nothing could be said. We were a team, but now everything has changed. Her partner started flirting with her at work, texting, and she also started responding to those flirtations. He said he was up for a promotion and wanted to make sure she was one of the candidates, that she was one of the best employees. After his promotion, he hugged her, which was their first intimate contact. He joked that she could thank him another time. One evening, the group went out for drinks and they sat at their own tables. He began to confide in her about his wife and children. After that, he invited her to his room under the pretext of listening to music and congratulating her on her promotion. He turned on the music, pulled her close, and started dancing with her. He kept saying that she was attractive, and if it were him, he wouldn't be able to keep his hands off her. She felt stunned, but couldn't escape those words. Finally, he kissed her, and she became stiff, unable to do anything but let things happen. Her partner started touching her all over, and they progressed to having sex. The feeling she experienced was an uncontrollable orgasm, but it all happened so fast. He laughed and said it was a wonderful celebration. After that, he fell asleep, and she quietly got out of bed, went to her room and showered repeatedly, trying to wash away the dirty feeling. But all efforts were in vain. That night, she couldn't sleep and just sat and cried, thinking about me. The next morning, there was only one meeting, but she did not attend. Her partner called and said he was disappointed that she missed her second chance in the morning. She barely answered him, and when he asked what was wrong, she lied and said she was drunk. He said he would cover for her during the meeting. She didn't want to continue contact, but he dropped all plans and said they wouldn't stay another day. She was afraid to tell me what happened, because she knew how much this deception would hurt me. She was determined to end this relationship by not contacting her adulterous partner outside of work hours. She came home early and felt more guilty than ever when we reunited, but on the outside, she acted as if nothing had happened. On Saturday morning, she tried to have sex with me as a way to undo what she had done, but instead she felt worse, especially when having sex without using a condom. Sue. On Monday, her cheating partner pulled her aside and she tried to tell him it was all a mistake, but he dismissed it immediately, only to be approached by another employee. Just stopped. After that incident, she called her sister in a panic. That day, my sister-in-law found out. At the same time, I received the truth through time. She cried as she read, then rested for a moment to catch her breath. There was nothing I could do but let her continue apologizing, but I let go of her hand and asked her to explain the timeline before I left. In the car, I couldn't hold my emotions. My mother didn't say a word, just hugged me. I sat there crying in my mother's arms, like a child looking for comfort. I wasn't strong enough to drive, and my mother drove us home. My stubborn wife kept calling and texting, damaging my mother's phone, but I told her I would handle it. Finally, I called her back. She asked me if I was okay, and I replied, "How could I be okay?" She apologized and admitted that I was right. She is no different from my father. She said that doing the timeline was like facing herself, and it gave her clarity. She said she loved me and only me, that before we got together, we were best friends and cherished every moment together. She said she hated herself for every choice she made, but she couldn't compare what she lost to what I and the other betrayed people had to go through. She asked if I could find it in me to reconcile, and she promised to always try to show me how important our relationship was to her and that she would make an effort to get everything back to normal. I cannot answer. My hands were shaking as if I could no longer control myself. All I can say is that I need some space. Do I regret hearing the timeline? No, because I need to know the truth. Sometimes a decision is difficult. Sometimes I'm emotionally detached, but once I've made a decision, I'll do everything to stick to that decision. That's always the way I do it. I still love my stubborn wife. We've been through a lot together, and I don't want to lose this relationship. But every time I think back to what happened, I just feel devastated. I think personal counseling would be a good option. I did consulting work after my father's affair, and I still feel the need to do so now. I also knew that I needed to get my stubborn wife to take a pregnancy test. She is on birth control, but I still need any opinions and advice about the situation. I don't think I'm wrong about the timeline. In the end, I just really hope that she won't shy away from the truth. And it's hard to hear someone say they love you when their actions say otherwise. Thank you for always being vulnerable with me, OP. Update 4. After I finished listening to the timeline, I discovered some more information. Thank you to everyone who has reached out and provided advice and support. Any help is greatly appreciated. This is an update on the situation. Since my wife read the timeline, there hasn't been a single moment I've forgotten. All the emotions kept spinning inside me, and I still couldn't sleep well. I reread the timeline at least once a day, and each time I experienced a bunch of different emotions: sadness, anger, hurt, and confusion. Sometimes I can't even put my feelings into words. I don't think she's lying or trying to heal herself. Everything matches what other betrayed spouses have shared. I think the passage of time had a big impact on her. An affair is an affair, but I believe the fair partner sought to take advantage of her. I feel angry for not realizing it sooner and protecting her. When we were just 17 years old, a serious incident happened to her mother. She came to my house in a panic, and I hugged her, promising to always protect her at any time. Now I feel like I failed in that role, especially with a partner as fair as this. I don't realize his motive. I believe her words. On Friday night, I texted another betrayed partner to discuss how she and her family were doing. She called back, and her voice was filled with worry. She shared that things were very difficult with the children, and she just tried to focus on them. She said this divorce would be very bitter, while the fair partner acted like he was the victim without even a single apology. At this time, I found out about an allegation from 5 years ago at the equity partner's previous job. A coworker reported him to Human Resources for retaliating against her after she rejected him, but it ultimately went nowhere. She was considered a difficult employee and was eventually bitterly fired. This information took me a moment to digest. I asked my stubborn wife if the equity partner would give her a clear timeline. She replied that she was not interested in such a person anymore because she just wanted a divorce. She asked me if I had made a decision with my stubborn wife, and I replied that I hadn't decided yet. She suggested that I could find a lawyer when I was ready or just go in for a consultation. I took the information and thanked her. Then we continued talking about life after D-Day before hanging up. I feel angrier towards a fair partner. I believe he had his eyes on my wayward wife, but she had a growing crush on him. This just makes me feel deeply hurt, lost, and betrayed. Yesterday, I still couldn't forget what the other betrayed spouse said into my mind. My sister-in-law called me with a worried voice. She asked if I had talked to my wife, and I replied that I hadn't been in touch since Thursday. She said she was worried about my wife not eating or drinking anything and not feeling well at all. She advised me to try talking to my wife, but I had already decided to see her. On the way there, I stopped at a restaurant that my stubborn wife loves and ordered takeout of her favorite dish. After that, I went straight home without warning. Part of me wonders if an equitable partner can be found there this time, but his car was not present. I walked into the house and saw my stubborn wife sitting on the couch. The TV was on, but she wasn't watching. She looked like she was going through hell, and conflicting emotions came over me. Part of me feels she made the wrong choices that led to this situation, but another part of me wanted to comfort her, wanted to promise that everything would be okay. She was surprised to see me, tried to stand up, but then sat down again. I gave her food and said I wanted her to eat something. She refused, saying I didn't have to do this, but I was adamant that I wanted to do it. I helped her sit at the table, got her a drink, and she started eating. Then I asked her if her equity partner would come to the house. She said no. I asked if I could see her phone, and she gave it to me without hesitation. While she ate, I looked for her phone. There haven't been any new chats with the fair partner, and his number remains blocked. I waited until she finished eating, then told her about the call from her sister, which made her seem disappointed. She promised that she wasn't asking her sister to do that, but was trying to respect my request for space. But I said it's okay. I'm not bothered by that call. She said I didn't need to rush home to take care of her, but I replied that our vows said otherwise. When she started to cry and say that she had ruined us, that she had ruined me, and that our relationship was the most beautiful thing in her life, I just kept quiet. She went on to say that she was angry at herself, disappointed in herself for hurting and betraying me in the deepest way. She says she will never forgive herself. Her words had a strong impact on me, and I couldn't bear it anymore. She kept saying she didn't deserve me, tearing herself to pieces. In the end, I said I don't regret being with her. I listed the times she saved me and said I wouldn't be here without her. I reminded her of the first day we met when I was 5 years old, then the times after we started loving each other and all our beautiful memories. I never wanted to leave her. She was everything to me, and that never changed before D-Day. We just cried without saying another word. Finally, I told her I needed to go. As I left, she thanked me for stopping by, said she would accept any consequences, and would begin considering individual counseling. I just nodded, unable to say anything more. I scheduled my first individual counseling session for Monday, but I feel like I still don't know how to proceed. All the mixed emotions made me depressed, and I felt like I was trapped in a maze of pain. The story ends with a heavy heart when the husband makes the heartbreaking decision to leave. The pain of discovering betrayal is something no one can truly prepare for, and he, the man in this story, has had to go through a journey filled with humiliation and heartbreak. Every step he takes is a choice, a decision made with great inner conflict, a decision that is never easy. Yet, in every moment, he not only felt disappointed, but also realized something profound. No matter how deep the love is still the true foundation to maintain a relationship. Faced with betrayal, he learned not to lose himself, even though the wound was so deep that he no longer knew what to trust. And throughout this story, the intertwined emotions, love, pain, and the determination to find inner peace leave an indelible mark on anyone who watches. But when looking at this story, isn't it also a valuable life lesson? No one can escape the great challenges that life throws at them, and no one can guarantee that every relationship will have a happy ending. But one thing is certain, every challenge brings invaluable lessons. This story is not just about love or betrayal, but also about how we deal with pain and betrayal without losing ourselves. It is important that we learn to stand up after each fall and not let pain determine our lives. When the husband in this story passed away, a part of him changed forever. He is no longer the man who once believed in perfect love. He learned that sometimes we cannot change the past, but we always have the right to choose how to face the future. He chose a different path, a path where he could find himself again after the hurt. And in the silence, through the pain and inner turmoil, he realized that sometimes love is not the only important thing. Trust, honesty, and respect are the true foundations of a lasting relationship. So if you were the husband in this story, what would you do? Can you forgive and continue living with the wife who betrayed you? Or will you choose to leave and leave everything behind? This is not an easy question to answer, but it forces us to reflect on the value of trust and love. Do we have enough strength to forgive our mistakes or choose our own path to find peace? Surely each of us will have different answers, but one thing is certain. Every decision must be based on a deep understanding of our own values and honesty in our relationships. If you also find yourself fascinated by this story, if you feel the pain and loss that the main character is going through, then remember to subscribe to our channel to continue watching emotional stories. This deep emotion and meaning. These stories are not only entertaining, but also provide valuable life lessons. Each story carries within it lessons about love, trust, forgiveness, and the strength of the human spirit when faced with difficulties. Don't miss our upcoming videos where we continue to share stories that help you reflect on life and important values that we sometimes forget.